but we might as well make a start. Thanks everyone for joining. And this is actually the last webinar in the series. So, like I say, if there's anything that you want to bring up, this is really the best chance to do that. And I was hoping to, get into maybe more specific discussions about your stations, because I know I started talking about them last week when we were all together. But I wanted to, uh, look at each individual station and try to sort of talk through what you might want to do with this training. So if at any point you want to sort of come in on that, that'd be great. So today, those big questions of funding and sustainability are at the forefront of our minds. Putting together a program that will benefit our station, hopefully, and also obviously the people that we want to work with. And then when we look at that in the broader sense, in the practical sense, who do we need to work with perhaps to make that happen? So, who do we need to maybe enter into partnerships with? So hopefully I will touch on these points as we go along. When I thought about funding training, and this is in the handbook, I'm not sure if any of you have had a chance to read the handbook, but we thought that there were basically three levels of funding, and I've actually added a fourth just for this presentation because I thought that it was a different, slightly different category. But really, the main, if we just kind of look at funding broadly, the main ways in which that would happen would be funding an outcome. So that would be getting a certain percentage of people perhaps into employment. So you target a group of, perhaps young unemployed people, and your course, or through your course, you're saying that you're going to get a percentage of people into employment. If you get that target, then you get that funding, perhaps. So that's a funding an outcome. And I guess we're kind of all familiar with that concept. And the second, well, in fact, the next three are all really around qualifications and delivering qualifications. So the funding, the outcome doesn't need to involve a qualification, although it might, but it doesn't need to. The next one, when we talk about delivering a qualification in partnership with a learning provider, so breaking that down, I don't know if it's useful, but I break delivering qualifications down into there's two levels, if you like, of delivering qualification. There's being a learning provider at the end. That's where you take full responsibility for the verification of the qualification, where you are kind of rubber stamping, going through the whole process from beginning to end, delivering the qualification as well as the paperwork and so on like that you need to have in order to give to the awarding body ultimately, and they will say yes, all the paperwork is in place here, that person gets that qualification. So in that final bullet point, you're doing all of that work yourself. Whereas on the second point, that would be where you get somebody else to do the accreditation or verification. I mean, we can use different words, but depending on how we're looking at this. But the partner is the organization that takes the responsibility of that accreditation. So that would often be a school, a college, or an employability provider, a commercial employability provider, and you're doing the training, but they're doing the assessing or verification or accreditation. All these words are kind of synonymous in this context. So that would be a partnership model. Whereas the fourth one, where you're a learning provider, would be where you're taking it all in-house and you're doing it all yourself. And you've probably got the picture already that Brian from Shmoo, that they're the fourth example. They're the learning provider. They do everything themselves, and yeah, so they don't need another partner. Whereas Gemma from Reform, they are somewhere between the first and the second. They do outcome-based work, but they also do work that is in partnership with colleges. So they deliver a traineeship for, I think it's Salford College. I could be wrong on that, but college in Greater Manchester, and so the college is the body that would take the responsibility there, and they would do the training, but they would get a chunk of that funding from the partner, and that's the point I wanted to make in this whole context, is that depending on where you are in those four stages, that would dictate, maybe what portion of funding you get from delivering that work. So in the learning provider setup, you would get the full funding that goes together with that qualification, and yeah. So, for example, Shmoo get funded from the Scottish government to deliver qualifications, and they get that full funding. Whereas Reform Radio, in doing the traineeship with the college, they would get a portion of that funding. The college gets the full funding from the government, and then they pass on some of that funding to the community radio partner. So different models of doing it. And then the third one there, I've inserted, it's somewhat similar maybe, but it's a partnership with a council perhaps, or with another funding body. So councils again have statutory funding, or funding to do all sorts of things, and you can develop a service level agreement with the council to achieve a variety of goals. It could be community cohesion, it could be upskilling particular groups, it could be, well, it could be just specifically employability training, but it need not be. The important thing is to identify maybe target groups or priorities of the council that you can then help to achieve. And you would then deliver the training in partnership with the council, and the council would probably look after the paperwork qualification side of things. Although I should say that again doesn't need to involve a qualification. It could do, but it doesn't need to. I have mentioned, so outcome-based work. I mentioned getting a percentage of unemployed people into work, but it doesn't necessarily need to be about employability. That you could package this, like I was talking about the council work. You could identify a priority of a particular funder, whether it's citizenship or reducing reoffending, or working with particular groups like marginalized groups, and you could deliver employability based work around that outcome, but you don't necessarily need to be packaging it as explicitly employability, but you could include elements of employability in that work in order to kind of give it more credence, or give it more emphasis, or desirability, I guess, for the funder themselves. I in fact, I didn't actually mention explicitly schools in the first slide that I looked at, but when we think about uh, sort of qualifications and developing a package, a lot of people would be interested in working with schools. And in fact, I would be interested if any of you work in schools. I know Hive, I think you have said that you were working with some schools, or maybe you were intending to work with some schools, but uh, it would be very useful to know what that work looks like or might look like. Maybe we'll have a chance to talk through that uh, today. Um, but this was to talk through a range of kind of factors, I guess, or um, uh, things that we've picked up through working with schools, and maybe to pass on some of our thinking around that work. So in Employment FM, we worked with two PRUs, pupil referral units. So if people don't know what that is, it's basically a school that is set up for students who are excluded from other schools. Um, so, okay, thanks, Diane. That's really useful. Um, so pupil referral units are um, a kind of a type of specialist school. So they have a particular provision for young people who have struggled basically with mainstream education, and they have various um, frameworks in place. But what we've discovered in Employment FM is that that presents an opportunity, and we actually have found that mainstream schools are sometimes hard to develop a package, although we'll get into that maybe in a second. But for mainstream schools, they have a very strict kind of funding model, and often head teachers are constrained by that, and they can't actually, even if they wanted to do some innovative work, it's sometimes hard for them to justify uh, doing that and to pass on that work to you, because ultimately that's what we're trying to explore here, is opportunities for community radio stations to enter into partnerships with these kind of organizations. So we have found, basically getting to the point, is that PRUs have more flexibility in their timetable, but also in their budget. And we think that that's an opportunity for community radio stations to perhaps step into, so that you could um, develop a package for a school, say we can do this, whether it's one day a week, or whether it's a few mornings every week, or whatever. That's the kind of detail that you would um, get into conversation with the school. But really the important thing is to put this in front of usually the head teacher in the school, and say, excuse me, we can do this. This is maybe how much it would cost, and I'll get into budget in a second. Um, and to open that conversation with the school. So we think that that is potentially a way forward for you. Um, and we have courses and we have materials that you can use to actually leverage that conversation with the school, and actually give your pitch more credence. Um, and also I should mention that SEN schools sometimes again have more flexibility. That's special educational needs schools. And again, in Employment FM, we worked with an autism specialist school, and they were very receptive to this work, and they thought that this was really something that they could make use of. Um, and it was a very successful partnership, actually. So and again, we have a course that is again linked to a qualification, and if you just wanted that course, we can just give you it. So uh, so uh, just saying that there are opportunities here to work with schools. um I should also mention those terms there: pupil premium and pupil equity fund. The pupil equity fund is in Scotland only. And I don't know, we often have Gordon with us, but I don't think he's with us this morning. Um, so I don't think we have any Scottish stations here this morning. Um, in England, then I think that they're pretty much equivalent is the pupil premium, and you may know of this already. In fact, I don't know what there is in Ireland. Sorry, folks. Um, but that would be a discretionary fund that is given to the school around disadvantage. So if your pupils are from a particular uh, level of disadvantage, for want of a better phrase, the school gets a particular piece of funding uh, per pupil. It, I think it used to be called free school meals. I know obviously there's recent shenanigans with free school meals in England, but I can't be completely sure about that. If anyone wants to clarify things or to take me up, please do. But the basic point here is that schools have some discretionary funding that they are given that then again presents an opportunity for you perhaps to say we can deliver this kind of training for perhaps your a particular set of students or just open it out in general and to say that you can deliver something and then the school will hopefully fund you. That is the point here. Um, Another thing I wanted to just throw out there, and it's something that we're only starting to think about. When I say we, I mean Radio Regen, and this is something that potentially we could build on um, after this or sort of from this project is the idea of alternative provision. Now, I don't know if anyone knows much about this, but again, uh, somewhat similar to what I was just saying, uh, schools have a responsibility to engage their students, and if students are looking like they're disengaging, as in they're just not attending school or they're causing trouble or whatever, um, and they're not quite at the risk. Well, they're at the risk of becoming excluded, um, and then they would move on to a pupil referral unit. But there is a sort of a stage in between almost, um, which is an area that is this is called alternative provision basically in I don't know if it's again the funding and education landscape in the UK is so complicated. I never know whether something is UK wide or whether it's England and Wales. So what the situation is in Scotland, for example, I don't exactly know on this front. But alternative provision is both an opportunity and a challenge, I think, currently, because it is there are a lot of alternative providers kind of popping up and working with schools and saying we can do this for you and so on. We can take care of you, we can um, work with your disadvantaged students and so on. But it's somewhat unregulated space, and schools don't um, well, yeah, so they're not all regulated by Ofsted. So there's a kind of a variety of providers out there. Um, Now that does again present an opportunity for you if you wanted to develop something yourselves that could, you know, constitute an alternative provision package for a school. Um, but uh, so it again, it's an opportunity perhaps, but it's something that we're only just starting to explore. So I can't really give you any solid sort of foundations. I can only give you that this is what we're thinking about, and if it's something that you're thinking about, please get in touch um, because we think it could be viable. But again, it's just whether or not that is the case is something we're interested in finding out. Um, so then just final points there, and I was going to make these before, but the focus on employability, like I said, isn't necessarily essential when you're looking at school-based work, but it does help. And again, this is something that we've learned through the Employment FM, working with schools, like making that pitch to the head teacher. Often having an employability focus will just get the head teacher kind of nodding and saying, okay, that sounds something like we want to do, because they want to improve employability prospects of their students. They also want to improve the communication skills of their students and the confidence of their students, and all of these things are kind of um, they're all part of a package, I guess. So um, we have found that it's a good way of, of making a pitch to schools, and I should say other organizations too. We've worked with the Youth Justice organization in Manchester, which is basically the youth offending team. And again, having an employability focus was very useful. Like they immediately saw the benefit of this work, and so then they funded this work. So uh, you know, it's about identifying something that they want to fund, and then saying we can do that. And again, like I say, qualifications aren't essential, but they do help. So sometimes, if you can throw that in that conversation that you're having with the youth justice organization, with the council, with the school, um, it sometimes is the clincher, that they will, uh, authorize this work, because they can see that you're actually going to be not just doing something that's fun, but actually leading towards something that's tangible for the for the student or beneficiary, or whoever. So that really is kind of what I wanted to talk about in terms of the funding landscape. And of course, there's so much more that we could say, but really, that's what I wanted to kind of map out for you. Um, and I wanted to give an example. Again, it's a shame that Brian from Shmoo isn't here today, but I wanted to show you what they have put together. This is, well, it's a bit bright on my screen. I hope you can read this. Excuse me. This is the Shmoo progression pipeline. When the numbers going across are actually ages, so ages of students, So this is what they've mapped out in terms of where they work with, like what ages they work with young people, and what programs they have in place, as in work programs rather than radio programs. So the 10, 11, 12 age group is what they call their Speak Out program, and they do this with schools. And this relates exactly to what I was just saying about the Pupil Equity Fund, that this is funded directly through that fund in Scotland. So that, excuse me, the the fact that the school has this discretionary funding, excuse me, enables Shmoo to say, well, we can do this for you, um, and we will work with your students. And I think that they have a program. Is it a few sessions per week? Excuse me, over 6 weeks, and leads then to a live radio show at the end of that. And it's been a very successful program. And he says that, so this is working with primary schools, and that they're almost biting their hands off to do this work. Um, so this has been a very successful program for Shmoo, and it's expanding quite fast for them. So just an example of what I was just saying there. But then and then the other work that is from 13 on, early interventions, also based in school, and that's I think again is a few sessions per week, but it's over a whole year. And then the positive transitions is where they work with often students who have kind of dropped out of school or who are at risk of dropping out, and that's where they start working with young people, young adults, to really hone work focused skills. And positive transitions is the course that Brian has been talking about most through the course of this webinar series. Um, the work that they do with getting young people thinking about work, and then actually signposting them towards working opportunities. So you can kind of see that Shmoo have identified a whole suite, if you like, of programs of activities, and they've targeted at different groups. So working with schools, in primary schools, then working with secondary schools, and then working with the sort of the end of secondary school, where students are kind of disengaged or uh, somehow just kind of falling off the pipeline. And what engagement and support Shmoo have in place then to um, to to improve people's life prospects, I guess. Um, like I say, it is a shame that Brian isn't here because he could give you more detail. But if there is something that is kind of uh, intriguing you or confusing you, please uh, get in touch and we will endeavor to clarify those things for you. You know, if there's something that you want to emulate or replicate, uh, Shmoo are very open to sharing their resources and their materials. So please just get in touch and we will hopefully be able to give you something that would help you to do something similar yourselves. Um, so I wanted to move on. Well, you've seen some of these things already, and I was going to kind of bring in things that we've already seen in the context of uh, funding and partnerships and so on like that. But obviously, you can see there that this can lead to uh, uh, group of people with qualifications uh, ready to go. Um, and you've seen this already as well that thinking of funding that this if you go down the route of becoming a learning provider, then you can tap into quite significant funding, which enables you to become sustainable as an organization. So uh, again, if you can read this, but every young person that comes onto Shmoo's course, Shmoo gets a payment of £850, and every person that goes on to a job gets Shmoo, sorry, gets £600, and if that person stays in the job for 26 weeks, then they get a further £400. They go into an apprenticeship, they get £1,000. So, if you go down the route of becoming a learning provider, then uh, you unlock basically a level of funding that would uh, alternatively be given to schools or colleges or employability providers. Or I guess what I'm saying here is that you could become an employability provider and unlock this funding for yourselves. Excuse me. Um, but in order to get that funding or in order to get any of this kind of funding, you need to have a sense of, well, obviously you need to design a program and you need to define what that is uh, yourself. And I know we've kind of raised a lot of these questions already before, that will help you to shape the course that you're putting together. Is it accredited? Um, what is it focusing on, and who are the learners? So those kind of critical questions um, will shape the whole thing. Um, but I also wanted to frame these questions in terms of cost, because the 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 course that you um, design, or sorry, the program really that you design is going to have to be costed, and you're going to have to uh, decide, how much of this to do yourself and how much of this to bring in from an external source. Like, are you bringing in external trainers or anything like that? um are you doing it in partnership with other organizations so that they um take some of the cost on themselves, or are you doing it all in house? So, in other words, taking on all of the cost yourself, and then, therefore, according to the answers to those questions, you can start to say, well, how much is this going to cost the funder? Like, if you're, I talked before about having a package, you know, um, if you're thinking of doing this work with a college or with a council or with any body like that, they're going to have to see a budget really, and they're going to say, they're going to ask how much is this going to cost. Um, Now I don't have the figures on screen because I thought it would be too small to look at, but in the training handbook, in the Employment FM handbook, that I hopefully, yes, I think I've sent I think I've attached it in an email. Now, I know I need to send you a whole range of resources, and I, I apologize for not sending all of the resources that I said I was going to send so far, but I thought it would be best through the week if I did this session and then send you everything in one go. So I'm going to send you the training handbook again, so don't worry. But and I will also give kind of page references in the email for you to look at this specifically. But I'm looking at the budgets and costs section of the handbook now, and we have actually put together a costed course. So and it's just an example, but it's there to serve as a template for you to think about, you know, what shape your course is going to look like, and then, you know, what's it going to cost. So we said a 50-hour course. Now your courses might be much shorter than that, but a 50-hour course, so that's 5 hours a week for 10 weeks, and we costed it in terms of uh, whether you would be doing all the training yourself, as in with your own trainers, or whether you're bringing in an external trainer. Like, you may want to bring in somebody who is uh, um, has employability skills, or maybe has skills of working with uh, youth offending people, um, or whatever. You may want to bring in some specific skills. So um, the, the the cost breakdown, and I won't go through all of the numbers, but I'll give you the page references in the handbook. It's page 15. I'm just looking at it now, and we've put together a kind of a template uh, for what this would cost, and the cost would be uh, um, broken down in, like, how much is it actually going to cost you, and then how much you would then charge the partner. And that's not thinking about profit or anything like that, although you may want to include some profit in what you uh, um, present to a funder. But it's more thinking about on costs and uh, equipment hire, and all of these other costs that people might not really necessarily think about, but that you need to have in place, and you need to have a training space, and you need to have obviously trainers and everything like that. So um, we've broken that down, and you can have a look at that. And I'm just uh, really making reference to that resource. But but I just wanted to make the point that you need to have a realistic sense of what this is going to cost you, and then how much you are going to charge the partner. Because what we don't want to happen, and what does happen sometimes, is that people sell themselves short and end up the, the the training that they deliver doesn't actually bring in anything to the station, or even ends up almost costing them more than because they've maybe lost revenue from the training room that they're using, that they otherwise hire out, for example. Um, I've heard that happen. So so really, I just wanted um, to present that to you, and I'll put that maybe more clearly in the follow-up email that I'll send hopefully this afternoon, with all of the different resources and links. Um, I wanted to quickly, I mean, uh, really, as ever, a lot of these questions when we're talking about these different subjects, they will always depend on um, who you're working with and what your organization is kind of how it's situated really in the community and in your area. Um, I was talking with Brian yesterday, and he was just emphasizing how important it is to have good relationships with the key organizations in your area. And I've mentioned partnerships already in the sense of delivering qualifications. So that would be where you're entering into a partnership with a school and they're taking on the accreditation responsibility. But we can also think about partnerships like, again, SHMU have a link with a youth uh, training, Concord Care. No, it's a, oh, I actually have forgotten what exactly the youth organization do, but they have a relationship where this organization provides SHMU with trainees, uh, and then also then, or sorry, this organization can provide SHMU with opportunities for their trainees to go on and do apprenticeships. And in sort of uh, uh, the flip side is that that SHMU do training for this organization to help them work with young people. So this organization does work with young people, but their staff don't necessarily have all of the um, training and knowledge and so on to work with young people or challenging young people or whatever. And so SHMU do that training for them. So sometimes it's about having symbiotic relationships with organizations. It may not work like that, but like the example I just gave you, but it could be uh, it could work like that. But the important thing is that they've identified that this organization is there is that need, and that they can provide that need for that organization. So, um, uh, but the other thing to think about in the sense of partnerships is who might you need to work with in order to support the people that you're aiming to train. So is it well, is it services, like council services, social work and so on like that. Um, uh, and then also Brian was kind of saying it's not just who you need to work with, but who do you want to work with? Like who is going to actually help you uh, as an organization to thrive and to flourish and to become a respected kind of organization in the community. Like what is it? What are the relationships that you want to foster to really make this work for you? Um, so I just wanted to flag up those questions really. There's no hard and fast rules, but it is path that needs to be explored. It's a question that you need to answer for yourself, I guess. And if you want to maybe some guidance to sort of on your journey, if you like. I've done an interview with SHMU where I sat down with Brian, who in this webinar series, but also Murray, who's the chief executive of SHMU, and I asked them, just to tell me the story of SHMU, how they developed their training arm, and what they needed to do to become basically so successful. And so they've told me that story, and I've put it in a podcast. And I don't know if any of you have had a chance to listen to that, but again, I'll give you the link to that podcast. It's about 25 minutes long, but I think it's worthwhile to listen to. And they really, at the end of that, they talk about the partnerships that they fostered and all of the work and effort that they put in order to get to that place. And basically what it's enabled them to do is to have a whole set of opportunities that young people will then go on to. So they have, great links with employers that young people can go off and do apprenticeships with, or do work experience with, or whatever it is. And that was as a result of this long work that they've put in. Um, this is probably, I do have some more slides after this, but this is probably the one that I wanted to uh, emphasize, because after this webinar series, like, I mean, I think all of you are, from what I've gathered, all of you are either doing this work and looking to expand this work, or are thinking about starting this work. So um, this, what you're seeing there is a set of, sorry, I brought a group of stations, just like ourselves, up to Shmoo in Aberdeen. I keep on talking about Shmoo in Aberdeen, but they're great. And we looked at what Shmoo do, and we tried to learn from them, and Shmoo gave us a good presentation on what they do and so on. And then out of that, we wanted to look at each of the stations who were there, and what we could do to help, uh, or what each station needed to do in order to uh, kind of achieve what they wanted to do. And we spent a good afternoon looking at these questions and actually developing action plans for doing this work. So I wanted to just pass this on to you, because I think ultimately you will have to do some exercise similar to this, and I can put these questions down for you in a more user-friendly way. You don't need to necessarily scribble them down here from this slide, but really you need to have a vision for what your training is going to actually look like. So what age of participants are we looking at? What kind of backgrounds are they coming from? Is there a specific background that people are coming from, or is it more general? Uh, the If you can read my writing there, we have stage levels 1 and 2. That was linked to the employability pipeline that's in place in Scotland. Now, I know that is specific to Scotland, but I think it's still a useful model. And if you're doing work in this area, I would encourage you to look at the employability pipeline. Again, I'll give you the link, because it gives a good breakdown of where people are at different points in their lives. Stage 1 being, I'm really not thinking about work, and I almost can't look somebody in the eye and all that. Whereas stage 4 and 5 is in work with a little bit of support. 5 is in work without needing support. So um, it's it's looking at where people might be, and then thinking about what support you need to have in place to work with that person. So the barriers aren't the barriers to your organization; they're more the barriers of the young people, and again, what support you need to have in place. Uh, so the vision encompasses all of that. Uh, um, that developing a program and a course, and what it might look like, how it might need to work. So that's the where you would like to be, maybe in 3 to 5 years time. Uh, that's your vision, and then the action plan. Uh, well, you've probably seen something similar to these before, but it is a useful exercise, I think, to go through, to once you have a vision for what kind of groups you're working with and who you're targeting and who your partners are, then you can say, right, so what needs to be done, who needs to do it, and what resources do we need to do it in, and who needs to know what. When we say communication, I think it's not just about who needs to send an email to who. It's about um, it's almost like your organization. It's like your organizational structure. And what we've realized working with this group of people, who you can see on the right in those photographs, um, we recognized that we as individuals don't sometimes have the power or the authority to make decisions in our organizations. Now, I don't know if that relates to you, to everybody here. But we realized that the chief executive of the organization sometimes needs to be the one who actually directs this work. It's all very well us having the vision, but this needs to be done from the organization as a whole. And if that's not in place, if everybody isn't on board really, then you're kind of struggling against the current. So I just wanted to sort of throw that out there because it may be a challenge that you might face. It may not be, because you may be so small that those kinds of issues don't actually present themselves. Um, then there may be different challenges about capacity and so on. But I just wanted to raise that one for you. For once, I'm not running out of time. I do have other slides that I could talk to, but I didn't want to labor them. But and I brought this in the first session, but it's just kind of what I was just saying there about getting your model or your vision for where you want to be, but then recognizing that you don't necessarily need to uh, uh, achieve that vision, or you don't need to achieve that vision instantly. You can think about this as a progression and think about what you need to do first in order to get to where you want to be in the end. And so sometimes that can be about just doing one simple course, maybe with just identifying 5 people, recruiting 5 people to a course, or whatever it is. And saying, I'm going to do this well, and I'm going to work with this group of people, and I'm going to do some good evaluation. And because of doing that good evaluation, then you have a model, you have some proof, and you can then go to funders and say, listen, I can do this. Will you fund me to do X, Y, Z? And so you can actually build your program that way. So it's about identifying those manageable steps, those stepping stones that you can that you can take on the journey. I actually wrote up the from what people have told me already through the course of this webinar. I just wanted to put them on a slide because I wanted to recognize that all of us have specific interests, and whether it's BAME groups, mental health training, whether it's local disadvantaged groups, whether it's adult education. Black Diamond Gordon isn't, I think, with us, but I wanted to ask him about his links with the lifelong learning and employability section of the council. And I think we have people from Spark, and I was intrigued by the Chapel of Light, Southwark, and what relationships you have there and what opportunities there were. Like I said at the beginning, the microphones can be turned on, and I was hoping that maybe we could discuss some of these, and we actually do have a few minutes to do that. But I know that in the past people are hesitant sometimes to turn on the microphones. But please do if you wish to, or if you want to raise some points in the chat, please do also. Oh, that's okay, Ben. But oh, here's Russell. Oh yeah. Hi Russell, did you want to come in there?
No, I just wanted to express my lack of reluctance. That was all. I just wanted to make it clear I wasn't reluctant to speak. I just and I thought I would prepare myself if I wanted to chip in.
Oh, good. Well, here you go. You have the floor.
Well, it was only just to clarify, really. It wasn't so much that we wanted to work with adult education as an adult education program, but we wanted to work through adult education, perhaps to work with kind of niche groups, or because they would have the resources and they would have the accreditation background, really.
Okay, exactly. As always, the sound is a little bit
Yeah, sorry, I
like
can hear it's a bit phasey, isn't it?
yeah. Okay, but you know, it's good to have. I mean, do you already have a good strong link with that adult education center? I know they're across the road from you. Do you
Yeah,
already
but
have? Yeah.
they're our landlord.
Okay. Okay. And that's often the case. I think other people, a lot of community radio stations are based, you know, in either in the school physically or right next to uh, an education center, and so yeah, no, good to have that link. Um, so I was just wondering whether do you have a handle on what kind of package, to use that word, you're going to develop here, or was that something that you were leaving until after the series?
Well, the issue for us is capacity, really. We have very, very small premises, so we would need to find a way of developing something that worked for both parties in terms of the numbers, and then how we utilise studio provision and spare schedule time in order to create something that's attractive to both parties, really.
Yes, absolutely. I mean that's a key thing, and like you say, studio capacity. It often presents itself as a challenge. Um, but I don't know. I mean, sometimes people clear a slot in the week. I think Reform Radio have what they call, I think, a community slot. I know that you know, um, we're community radio stations. They should all be that. But maybe we could think of it as a trainee slot or something like that, so that their trainees, every Friday afternoon, I think it is their day when they'd have people who are maybe a bit more rough and ready, and so the listeners almost are prepared for that. So that's the way that
Yeah.
they manage their studio time and output, because they have a kind of a slick sound to their station. But I mean, it is a factor. Um, but what else was I thinking there? As you say, mutual benefit for you and the organization. I think that's key. To get something that works for you both, because it's got to, but it can do. It really can do. So if there's anything that I can send you that would help that, please, let me know, and I'll do that, Russell. And
I think the handbook is great, actually. There's loads of stuff in the handbook that's useful.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. But I have loads of stuff to back up that what's in the handbook. I mean, the handbook was only ever meant as a sort of a brief overview of the whole landscape. So I'll maybe, there's other things I can send you, like course structures and all sorts of things that you know if you're going down the qualification route, I could send you that stuff, or if there's other more evaluation based tools that you'd like support with. Um,
Okay, well,
so
that's great. Thanks.
yeah, and I should say that to everyone. Obviously, that's not just to Russell. That's an open offer to everyone. And I wanted to, because we are now actually basically on time here. Um, just I just wanted to emphasize that this support is ongoing. I think we will be actually going for another little bit longer. Uh, I know I said that the project was coming to an end, but I think we have maybe, I'm still negotiating, but I think we may have a little bit more time. Um, Certainly we have loads of resources we can give you in the short term, but if there's support you want over the next, say, few months, I'm very happy to have a conversation with you, either by phone or Skype or whatever like that, and there may be opportunities to come together, and maybe even set up some links with Shmoo and so on, that might help you to refine what you're actually doing, and to kind of define your model, and all of that. I should say that as well as the handbook that I've been mentioning and that Russell just mentioned, we've also got a few things that were to help you to make that pitch to organizations that you might want to work with. So for example, schools I mentioned a lot. I've developed a little leaflet, like a 4-page A5 kind of little mini booklet that we've developed so that you could just give that to a head teacher and say, look, this has worked elsewhere. We're proposing to just do this ourselves. So again, these resources were meant to not publicize the project. It was more to help you to do what you want to do. So I'll send you those different resources. I haven't got a final signed off booklet just yet. We're just still working with our designer on that. So once we get that signed off, I'll send that to you. So that's one resource that I can't send to you today, but the other ones I will. I don't know if there's anything else in that list that that I wanted to signpost, but it's really. I guess I just wanted to emphasize that there are loads of resources that hopefully will help you. But if there was something that you wanted specific help with, please get in touch, and I'll do my best.